Level 1, the calculator. You are 22 years old. You are sitting at a steel desk in a cramped, windowless room in Virginia. It is October 1957. You work for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the NACA. You are a junior engineer. You do not have digital computers. You have a mechanical adding machine, a slide rule, and a terrifying amount of pressure. The room is thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of stale coffee. Suddenly, a senior engineer walks into the room. His face is completely pale. He turns on a shortwave radio. Through the heavy static, you hear it. A sharp, high-pitched sound. Beep, beep, beep. It is Sputnik 1. The Soviet Union has just launched the world's first artificial satellite, a metallic sphere weighing less than 200 pounds. It is flying right over your head at 18,000 miles per hour. The sound of that beep is the sound of America losing. The panic in the country is absolute. The press calls it the Sputnik crisis. The government realizes that if the Soviets can put a metal ball in orbit, they can put a nuclear warhead on an intercontinental ballistic missile and drop it on Washington. You are told that your agency is being completely reorganized. The NACA is dissolved. On July 29, 1958, President Eisenhower signs a law creating a new civilian space agency. You are no longer just an aeronautics researcher. You are now a rocket engineer for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Your new job is simple. You have to figure out how to beat the Soviets into the dark. But the Soviets are already miles ahead. You watch in horror in December 1957 as the American Vanguard rocket explodes on the launch pad, just seconds after liftoff. The newspapers call it a Flopnik and a Kaputnik. The humiliation is a physical weight on your chest. You work 16-hour days. You sleep under your desk. The space race has begun, and you are terrified that you have already lost. Level 2, the payload specialist. You are 26. It is 1961. The stakes are no longer just satellites. The stakes are human lives. You are assigned to Project Mercury. The goal is to put an American in orbit. You are working with rockets derived from military ballistic missiles, like the Redstone and the Atlas. The Atlas missile uses a ridiculously thin, stainless steel fuel tank that relies entirely on internal pressure to keep from collapsing under its own weight. You have to strap a man into a tiny, cramped capsule, placing him directly on top of hundreds of thousands of pounds of highly explosive liquid oxygen and kerosene. But once again, the Soviets beat you. On April 12, 1961, Yuri Gagarin completes a full orbit around the Earth in his Vostok 1 capsule. The Soviet Union is parading him around the world as a hero. The political pressure on your team becomes unbearable. President John F. Kennedy goes before Congress on May 25, 1961. He doesn't just ask you to match the Soviets, he doubles the stakes. He declares that America will land a man on the moon and return him safely to the Earth before the decade is out. You listen to the speech on the radio, and your stomach drops. You haven't even successfully put a man in orbit yet, and the president is demanding a lunar landing. You are part of the team that launches Alan Shepard on May 5, 1961, on a suborbital flight. When his capsule, the Freedom 7, splashes down safely, you don't celebrate. You just exhale. You calculate the thrust-to-weight ratios. You analyze the telemetry data. You know that getting to the moon requires a vehicle thousands of times more powerful than the modified missiles you are currently using. You are trying to build a bridge to the stars, using nothing but math and brute force. Level 3, the orbital dynamicist. You are 30. It is 1965. You have transitioned to Project Gemini. Going to the moon requires 2 spacecraft to meet and dock together while traveling at 17,000 miles per hour in the absolute vacuum of space. No one has ever done this before. It is called orbital rendezvous. You are staring at chalkboards covered in complex differential equations. Orbital mechanics defy human logic. If you are behind another spacecraft and you fire your engines to speed up and catch it, your orbit actually widens, moving you into a higher altitude, which causes you to slow down. To catch a target, you actually have to slow your spacecraft down, drop into a lower, faster orbit, and then rise up to meet it. It is a terrifying, high-speed ballet. During the Gemini 8 mission, you are in the control room. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and David Scott successfully docked their spacecraft with an unpiloted Agena target vehicle. You allow yourself to smile for exactly 10 seconds. Then the telemetry data goes completely wild. The spacecraft starts spinning violently. A thruster has short-circuited and is firing continuously. sending the astronauts into an uncontrolled, dizzying roll. If the spin reaches a certain speed, the G-forces will cause the astronauts to black out and die. You are frantic. You are shouting vectors and thruster override commands. Your hands are shaking so violently you drop your slide rule. Neil Armstrong manages to shut off the stuck thruster and uses the re-entry control system to stop the spin. He saves their lives. You walk out of the control room that night and throw up in the parking lot. You realize that space is an environment actively trying to kill your friends every single second of the mission. You are playing a game of Russian roulette with the smartest men in the world. Level 4, the module designer. You are 32. It is early 1967. The Gemini program is over. You are now working on the Apollo command module. It is the most complex machine ever built by human hands. But the schedule is rushing. The pressure to beat the end of the decade deadline is forcing compromises. You are working on the environmental control systems. To save weight, the spacecraft is designed to use a pure oxygen atmosphere. You are also using a heavy inward opening plug door hatch, designed to seal tightly under the internal pressure. On January 27, 1967, you are monitoring a routine ground test for the Apollo 1 mission. Astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee are strapped inside the capsule on the launch pad. Then you hear the transmission. Fire! We've got a fire in the cockpit. The pure oxygen atmosphere turns a single, tiny electrical spark into an explosive, raging inferno. Because the cabin is pressurized, the inward opening hatch cannot be opened by the crew. You are paralyzed, listening to the screams over the headset. In less than 30 seconds, it is over. 3 of your closest friends are dead. The guilt is absolute. It is a crushing physical weight that makes it hard to breathe. The investigative board discovers massive design flaws, poor wiring, and a catastrophic failure to appreciate the hazard of a pure oxygen environment. You did not pull a trigger, but your engineering decisions directly contributed to their deaths. For 22 agonizing months, the entire Apollo program is halted. You do not sleep. You rip the command module apart, piece by piece. You design a new, quick-release outward opening hatch. You change the atmosphere mixture. You replace every piece of flammable Velcro and nylon in the cabin. You are driven by a dark, relentless obsession. You will never, ever let a machine kill a crew on your watch again. Level 5, the trajectory architect. You are 33. It is 1968. The program has recovered from the fire. The Saturn V rocket, a monstrous 3-stage Leviathan generating 7.5 million pounds of thrust, has been tested. But the lunar module, the vehicle actually designed to land on the moon, is heavily delayed. It is too heavy, and it is full of bugs. Meanwhile, the CIA receives intelligence that the Soviet Union is preparing to launch their Zond spacecraft to send cosmonauts on a circumlunar flight around the moon. The fear of the Soviets beating you again is paralyzing. NASA management makes an incredibly dangerous, unprecedented decision. Instead of testing the command module in low Earth orbit, they decide to send Apollo 8 all the way to the moon without a lunar module, just to beat the Soviets. You are tasked with calculating the translunar injection. You have to fire the 3rd stage of the Saturn V at precisely the right millisecond to shoot a spacecraft across 240,000 miles of empty space, aiming for a target that is constantly moving. If your math is wrong by a fraction of a percent, the crew will miss the moon entirely and fly off into the endless void of deep space to die a slow, cold death. On Christmas Eve, 1968, Apollo 8 enters lunar orbit. You sit in mission control, staring at the green text on the monochrome monitors. The crew disappears behind the far side of the moon. You lose all radio contact. The silence is terrifying. For 35 minutes, you don't know if they are alive or dead. Then, the static breaks. You hear the voice of Frank Borman. They made it. They broadcast live television pictures of the lunar surface and read from the Book of Genesis. They take a photograph of the Earth, rising over the bleak, gray lunar horizon. It is the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. You cry, silently, right at your console. You have finally taken the lead in the space race. But the ultimate test is still waiting. Level 6, the flight controller. You are 34. It is July 1969. Apollo 11. You are a senior flight controller in Houston. The Saturn V launch was perfect. The transit was perfect. Now, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are in the lunar module, the Eagle, descending toward the surface of the moon. At 30,000 feet, the radio crackles. Program alarm. It's at 12:02. Your blood runs completely cold. The lunar module's computer is overloading. It is receiving too much radar data, and it is resetting itself. You have exactly 10 seconds to decide whether to abort the mission and fire the ascent engine, or trust the computer's core programming to keep flying. If you make the wrong call, they crash into the moon. The guidance officer shouts that the alarm is acceptable. The computer is prioritizing essential tasks. We'll go on that alarm, you confirm over the loop. But the problems aren't over. The computer is flying the Eagle directly toward a massive crater, filled with boulders the size of cars. Armstrong takes manual control. He is flying the module like a helicopter, skimming over the surface, looking for a safe place to land. You watch the fuel gauges. 90 seconds of propellant left. 60 seconds. You are sweating through your white button-down shirt. The entire room is completely silent. If he runs out of fuel before he touches down, the engine will cut out and they will drop like a stone. 30 seconds, 15 seconds. Then, a voice cuts through the static. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. The room erupts. Men are screaming, throwing their headsets, crying. You lean back in your chair and you close your eyes. You just helped put a human being on another celestial body. You achieved the impossible. You beat the Soviet Union. You fulfilled Kennedy's promise with 161 days to spare. Level 7, the program director. You are 39. It is 1974. The euphoria of the moon landing is completely gone. You are now a high-level director. But the world has moved on. The public is bored with space. The politicians are focused on the Vietnam War and the economy. President Nixon drastically cuts NASA's budget. You are forced to cancel the Apollo 18, 19, and 20 missions. The massive Saturn V rockets you spent your life building are turned into museum pieces, left to rot on the grass outside the space centers. The space race is over. The Soviet Union's massive N-1 moon rocket failed every single test flight, blowing up on the launch pad. They secretly gave up on sending men to the moon and pivoted to building space stations. NASA tries to match them by launching Skylab, the first American space station, built out of an empty Saturn rocket fuel tank. But during the uncrewed launch of Skylab, a massive aerodynamic shield tears off, ripping away one of the main solar panels and jamming the other one shut. The station is dying in orbit, overheating, and completely out of power. You don't have the massive budgets of the 1960s anymore. You have to save $1 billion space station using duct tape and ingenuity. You design a parasol-like sunshade that the astronauts can deploy during a spacewalk to cool the station down. You coordinate the repair mission. It works. The crews stay in orbit for months. But the excitement is dead. You are no longer an explorer. You are a bureaucrat. You spend your days sitting in endless congressional hearings, begging politicians for money to fund the new space shuttle program. You watch the Soviet Union launch their Salyut stations, and you realize that space has become routine. It has become a business. The pure, terrifying, glorious madness of the Apollo days has been replaced by spreadsheets and cost-benefit analyses. Level 8, the ghost of the Cold War. You are 65. You are officially retired. You live in a quiet house in Florida, not far from the Cape. You watch the news on television. You see the American space shuttles launching, treating low Earth orbit like a regular cargo run. You hear about the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 and how the Russians are now launching American astronauts on their Soyuz rockets to the new International Space Station. The enemies you spent your entire youth trying to defeat are now your partners. You walk out onto your back porch. The night air is warm and humid. You look up at the sky. The moon is full and impossibly bright. Normal people look at the moon and they see a rock, they see romance, they see a poem. But you look at the moon and you see the math. You see the trajectory vectors. You see the delta V calculations. You hear the deafening roar of the engines. You smell the ozone and the burnt coffee in mission control. You see the faces of Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee smiling at you before they climbed into that capsule for the last time. You traded your entire youth, your health, and your peace of mind to win the greatest technological war in the history of mankind. You helped human beings break the ultimate boundary and step onto the surface of another world. But you realized the ultimate, haunting truth of the space race. You didn't just conquer the void of space. The void conquered you. It carved out your soul and replaced it with an insatiable, burning obsession for the impossible. You achieved the absolute peak of human ambition, but you are left behind on Earth, staring up at the stars, knowing that no matter what you do for the rest of your life, nothing will ever match the terrifying, beautiful glory of the days when you aimed for the moon and hit the target. This is the life of a NASA engineer. You climb the ranks from a terrified kid calculating trajectories by hand to the master of the most powerful machines ever built. You realize that true power isn't about reaching the stars. True power is carrying the crushing weight of human lives on your shoulders and having the sheer, relentless willpower to never let them fall.